All right, thank you for staying with Citizen TV. We're starting this conversation now after Jamhuri Day reflections. Let's see what you have to say. At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. The president says he's being unfairly targeted by critics who are not basing their accusations on facts, but rather on lies and disinformation. He says that 1, unemployment has reduced, 2, SHA is working, and of course the affordable housing is also working. His words. But my guests are with me here. Kasamwel, revolutionary artist, is joining us now. Morara Kebaso, civic activist as well, and they said he's running for president. And Angel Mbuthia, chairperson, Jubilee Youth League. Thank you all for making time. We're still waiting for Arnold Maliba, head of policy and public affairs and the UDA. As soon as he comes in, we'll drop him into the discussion. But Morara, let's start off with a reflection of Jamhuri Day. Yeah. The president says he's been unfairly targeted by critics and liars.
Yes.
Has he been unfairly targeted?
He actually called it misinformation. He called it disinformation. He said these are falsehoods. But the truth is that most of the issues that Kenyans are talking about are issues that have been proven beyond reasonable doubt. For example, the president was told and was aware that Kenyans had rejected the Adani deal. The Adani deal for the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where he was leasing the airport for 30 years and giving ownership to a foreigner at 20% of the airport. He said he was right on track, he insisted, he was consistent, until when Adani was finally indicted by the US is when he pulled back and said now he is cancelling the deal. Yet he had been told from the very beginning. So what we are seeing is a president who does not listen to the people, who does not care about what the people are going through, because he is talking about an economy that is doing very well. If you listen to him yesterday, you would think ni kama huko London, ni kama hauko Kenya. You would think he's talking about a different Kenya more than the one that we live in. Because the one that we live in, Kenyans are struggling. More Kenyans have been pushed to hunger. Many more businesses have closed. People are not making, it's not that there are new jobs, because he talked about a decrease in the number of people that are unemployed, and that he has created more than 200,000 jobs. But the truth is that many more companies have been closing down. Just recently, G4S company announced that it was going to fire some of its workers because of harsh economic times in Kenya. And many more companies have done that. That there are many, many more companies that have fired people in Kenya, and therefore people are not gaining employment. They are losing employment. So probably our politicians and our leaders in Kenya, they need a touch with the reality, because they seem to be very disjointed with the reality of the true situation of what Kenyans are going through. I saw him talk about the agricultural sector, maize, sugar, and coffee doing better, when we all know that it is doing worse, that we have not yet gotten the guaranteed minimum returns. Then we still have a problem with middlemen. We still have a problem with the imbalance of trade, where exports have decreased. The exports of agricultural produce that we used to take outside have decreased, and now we are importing food that we never used to import before. He is talking about the housing program. I call it the avoidable housing program. He calls it the affordable housing. First, we've proven that it is not affordable, because a bed sitter costs you about 1.79 million. That is unaffordable to 98% of Kenyans. So is he serving the 2% or serving the 98% that cannot afford the affordable housing? He's building the affordable housing on public land. That is another question about the ownership and under the law of the Public Assets and Disposal Act, whether you can actually own a house on public land. That's a question they've been unable to answer. He is talking about these houses coming to solve a housing problem, when people actually have much bigger problems than housing. He's talking about, just recently we saw that a title deed for public land was used by a private developer to borrow a loan from a bank. Can you imagine, in this same country, that a private developer building a housing program can actually take a title belonging to the Kenyan public and borrow money with it from a bank? How was it even accepted for that person to borrow? Yep. So all in all, the reflection is this. we had a Jamhuri Day. It was supposed to celebrate the independence of Kenyans, independence from disease, independence from bad governance, independence from colonialism, but now we are talking about neo-colonialism, we are talking about corruption, we are talking about bad governance. All over Kenya, most Kenyans did not turn up for Jamhuri.
Yeah.
They did not attend those celebrations, and that is because they have no faith and no trust in this government.
Okay.
And the earlier they leave, the better, but they are forcing themselves on Kenyans, so we wait to see.
Okay. Angel, is the president being unfairly targeted by critics and liars?
Trevor, I think one thing I've noted about the Kenya Kwanza administration is that it suffers from chest thumpingness and overconfidence, and that's what I see with Mr. Ruto, because Jamhuri Day has lost its luster. We are celebrating 60 years of independence, but Mr. Ruto has converted Kenyans into freedom fighters. This is not what our forefathers fought for before 1963. This is not what they envisioned for this country. Mr. Ruto is taking us back, and by refusing to acknowledge that we have made mistakes is a problem, because even when you're going to therapy, the first step to accepting, to begin healing is by accepting that you have a problem. Mr. Ruto is refusing the fact that there's a problem in this country, and the social contract between the government of Kenya and the people of Kenya is almost dead. I can call it a dead contract because Kenyans no longer trust this government. And as my colleague here, Morara, says that Kenyans refused to attend the celebrations, and those who attended went there in protest of what was being showcased there. And I'm very positive about the view Kenyans are having on this government. I don't think Mr. Ruto is being targeted. He's being called out for the very exact things that he's doing. The healthcare system is not working. The education system is not working. When we had the HELB formula, it was not perfect, but it was getting us somewhere. And he's not acknowledging that we have problems here, that we should have piloted SHA before we roll it out across the country is something that he should have considered. And then he goes ahead and says, kuna mapepo, people are rejecting his policies and his proposals. But he's forgetting that we have been in a situation where the Adani deal required a whistleblower to tell us that Kenya is going to go under siege. It required someone from out of these borders to tell us that our country is going to be taken hostage by foreigners. Then he wants us to trust and believe in his promises. I think that one is a long shot on him.
Okay.
Yes.
Kasma, has the president been unfairly targeted by critics and liars?
I do not think so. The president is suffering the consequences of a marketing spree, because that's what he gave to Kenyans. When they were out on a campaign, and this is a thing which I've consistently said about the Kenya Kwanza administration, they are still stuck on campaign mode. They had a very strong campaign that was very emotionally convincing, but then they did not have the actionable part of the campaign. And therefore you find a president, well, we have very basic expectations. We have a failing education sector. And by failing, I say that this is an administration that campaigned on a hustler versus dynasty ticket. And we find that this new funding model, for example, bringing about more bans, more classist segregations in terms of education, which is a right and not a privilege. We find failing healthcare. And on healthcare, it's the implementation. I do not have a problem with SHA as a concept, because universal healthcare if you think about SHA as a concept, it works. But spending 100 billion on a system that could have cost less than $1 billion does not make sense to me. We do not have economic or food security for our people. These are not things that are superficial. These are not things which you would sit down and say that we are attacking the president. You walk anywhere, people are complaining there is no money. People are saying that we do not have food. People are complaining at the bare minimum. While the administration has consistently talked about the prices of unga have gone down, we understand that even the purchasing power has gone significantly lower. So this is not an unfair attack on the president. It's just proof to Kenyans that the more we keep on falling for emotional tropes, the more we keep on falling for emotional campaigns, the more we keep on falling for the narratives that we need personalities as saviors, these are the kinds of results that we're going to get. Because they made very many promises to rejuvenate our economy. They made very many promises while they were campaigning. And now they've fallen back into, you've seen him going around appeasing the very dynasties that he swore to upset the very dynasties that he said that he is campaigning against. Those are the same dynasties that he's fallen back to for refuge. So it is not out of malice or anything. It is just that the president has not held his end of the bargain. There was a social contract, as my colleague Andrea said, that if a president promises certain things, that the bare minimum things that can be delivered. Yes, there are certain parts that he might have gotten right, but those parts have been gotten right because they've been gotten right around the globe. So I cannot necessarily give him credit for that. But for a sitting president to look at his citizenry, to look at his electorate, and 2.5 years into his reign, say that he is being targeted unfairly by liars and people who are out to tarnish his name for failing to meet the bare minimum of the social contract that they had for him is unfair of a president to expect of his citizenry.
Okay. Arnold Maliba is now joining us. He is the head of policy and public affairs at the UDA. Arnold, we started with the basics of reflections of Jamhuri Day. And has the president been unfairly targeted by critics and disinformation and fake news, like he says?
First of all, the word unfair could be a little bit subjective because I think oversight as of rights is in the Constitution, and whereas you might not like the tone and the words and the actions people use to oversight you, it's not in your place to actually have to like it. So from where we sit, I think, as a party, is that we don't have to like how people actually put us to account. We do not have to actually sanction what they do. At least when we work with the Constitution 2010, they are of right. If they break the law, they actually have got the police and other institutions within the judiciary to actually deal with that. So I do not think that we can use the word unfair. It's true, we might not like some of the words used, we might not like some of the action, because from where we sit as a regime, we see what we've done. We might not be so loud enough to actually go out there and say, this is what we have done, to a level where it can balance out. Let's use the word a balance of fire, for example, that is coming from the other side, this blue and red. We might not be loud enough to meet out, but then we cannot use the word unfair. On a regime, when you come into public service, you actually open yourself, and that really cuts across for those who are in civil society and those who are in mainstream government. So the word unfair is a little bit, for me, would be subjective, but I would say this, that we are not where we wanted to be. We are not where we promised that we will be, but we are not where we used to be. That is one of those things you cannot call us out and tell us that, you can't tell us that we are not where we used to be. But you see, seeing the background against which this regime came in, of course, the hustler versus the dynasty narrative has actually been put out. But then, if you read newspaper articles, including some that I actually wrote myself 4 or 5 years ago, look at what Ndi wrote 4 or 5 years ago. The only thing I'm surprised is that we are surprised as a nation that we are here. Otherwise, if you look at those articles, if you see what economists, you actually don't need to be an economist to actually know that what was actually prophesied, let me use the word prophesied, whatever was prophesied and expected to happen to the Republic as at of this particular point has actually been averted. But you cannot tell people that yesterday you were very hungry, today you are not, you had one meal, and therefore that is okay. So, as of oversight and whatever is out there, we might not like it, but the truth is that we are not where we told them we were going. We are not where we told them we'll be. But we also know, and we can actually hold forth very strongly so and say that we are not where economists and people projected we would be. So I just wanted to deal with the word unfair.
So let's deal with these issues one at a time. There are 3 things that he talked about. He talked about the Social Health Authority, he talked about affordable housing, he talked about unemployment. Yeah. Let's start with unemployment, for example. He says that 243,000 people are now being employed online. There was a promise that they would create 1 million jobs every year. Is that a fact or a lie?
You know, the president is the spokesperson, number 1, 001 spokesperson of government. And therefore, once he speaks, the president definitely has actually consulted the National Employment Authority. I've had an opportunity for the last 2 months to go across the country with university students to just get a feel to what they are doing, have a conversation with them, actually very bold conversations, not easy ones. Sometimes they've actually turned nasty, but exactly that is what public affairs is. If you get into the management of public affairs, you don't expect people to come and pat on your back. But I would say that even the 240,000 jobs that the economy has actually been able to create, it's not sufficient against a number of about 5 million young people. And you know, the definition of a person who is unemployed is that he should actually have sought a job in the last 3 months. At least we have got a definition of what an unemployed person is. You might actually not have a job, but you've never looked for a job. The definition of policy, in public policy, the definition is that we don't consider you as an unemployed person. If you've actively been looking for a job in the last 90 days, then you qualify within that. So if you're looking at about 5 million young people who really are going to the market, they want jobs, 240,000 is a drop, even if we were to do 1 million. And by the way, politics is about two things, personnel and perception. So Biden, for example, is actually pulling out so well. The Democrats in the US are pulling 277,000 jobs a month. But the people are not happy. They've actually kicked them out. So there's the element of perception, which we really have to actually talk to. And Trevor, we are at a point as a regime where we also want to have a conversation with the populace. There is no need of actually us fighting. Let's actually have a conversation, because we've got one republic, we've got one country, and our challenges do not change. Even if I woke up tomorrow and I'm the president of the republic, the challenges will be the same, and therefore we must have a conversation as a people, as opposed to actually having this adversarial way. And by the way, on both sides, these allow me to actually sit at a place that is a little bit delicate and say, there is this temptation by both sides, those who are oversighting and those who are implementing, to actually get populist. We also on government side have actually also gotten into the temptation sometimes of actually trying to get scores. And on the other side, the people who are also oversighting is on the opposition. On the other side, any other person calling out government. Sometimes people do it as an end in and of itself, even though you cannot actually again go and begrudge them for doing that. If they do it, even if it's for fun, that's them.
All right.
But then, can we also look at the republic, the life of the republic, and see that if anything goes south for us, there's no one here who wins.
Okay, we'll get into that in just a bit. But Morara, let's talk about this unemployment issue first.
Yes.
Does Arnold have a point when he says we are not where we want to be, but we're also not where we were before? Because even if, say, for example, the promise was 1 million jobs every year.
Yes.
But now the president yesterday says they've created 243,000 jobs online and abroad.
Yes.
It's not the 1 million.
Yes.
But at least something has been created.
Yes.
So we are not where we want to be, but we are not where we were. Are you buying that narrative?
The questions would be two. One, before a president made a promise that he would create 1 million jobs, he must have looked at the Kenyan economy, must have known what he was supposed to do to create those jobs. So what is this thing that he has not done for those jobs not to be created? Number two, the issue would be the President William Ruto's regime cannot be looked at in isolation. In my own view, you need to look at President Uhuru and Ruto's regime together, because that's when the problem in Kenya began. The problem in Kenya began with President Uhuru, now into President Ruto. I would treat this as the same regime from 2013, not just from 2022. Because if you judge the presidency of William Ruto from 2022, then you lose the bigger picture. If you look at it from, for example, public debt, you find that Kibaki let a public debt of about 1.8 trillion. Then in came the two brothers who wear same shirts and same ties, and they borrowed over 10 trillion Kenyan shillings, which you cannot see in infrastructure and in development. Now it has been proven, which I hope you will dispute today, that more than 7 trillion has been lost, which has been borrowed and stolen. A classic example being Eurobond. Now this theft and corruption, at the end of the day, impacts the opportunities that the young people can have in this country who are looking for jobs. The first thing that is a problem in our country is the cost of power. Why do we have high power cost? Two reasons: state capture and overtaxation. Because when you buy a token of Kenya shillings 50 bob, 20 bob is taxes. So if President William Ruto wishes Kenyans well and wants Kenyans to have more jobs, the best way to create jobs is usually industrialization. And industrialization is driven by energy and power. Why not reduce the cost of power so that this 20 bob out of 50 bob, which is taxes, does not become taxes anymore? Because that's almost half of the cost going to tax. Why not reduce the tax on power? Number two, about 5 or 6 billionaires who are called independent power producers are making a killing selling power to government through generated power, instead of us liberalizing the power market. Because if the power became cheaper in Kenya, more manufacturing will come into our country. Because there's no investor who is going to maybe establish a company to process, say, something here in Kenya, let's say to make braids, nywele, cosmetics, if the cost of power is expensive. Because one of the greatest expenses will be the machines and the amount of power that they consume. So that is just how state capture and corruption is affecting unemployment. So if you ask me, what is the problem in Kenya and why do we have unemployment, I'll point at an animal called corruption. Okay. Because corruption is taking away valuable resources that would have otherwise been spent in creating opportunities and opening up markets for Kenyans to have jobs. The number two is an economy which favors a few and disadvantages many. Yep. So we have so many people looking for jobs, but these jobs are sometimes even given on the basis of nepotism and tribalism. For example, there is a state corporation called the Kenya Pipeline Corporation, KPC. You go to that corporation, over 70% of the people employed there, they come from one ethnic community. So then you ask yourself, how did it become possible for a national corporation which covers the whole country? Is it that only people from one ethnic community applied for these jobs? You go to the Ministry of Water, the Water Services Board. You check the ethnic composition of the people who are getting jobs. You find that jobs are people are being employed on the basis of tribalism, on the basis of nepotism, and sometimes on the basis of corruption, which actually got the deputy governor of Kisii impeached, Robert Monda, because of requesting for a bribe for someone to get a job in the public sector. So there's a lot of pressure. If you advertise for jobs, personally I've advertised for jobs, for Morara Home Furniture company that I'm running. And I only have opportunities for 10 carpenters, but I have more than 2,000 applications. So you don't even know what to do with the rest of the applications. The other way to solve this unemployment crisis is to open up entrepreneurship. Okay. So that young people do not have to go and look for the job, they can create the job themselves. Let's look at the cost of borrowing in Kenya. Most of the businesses in Kenya, the profit margin is between 8% and 20%. So if you're doing FMCGs, that's fast-moving consumer goods, like soap, cooking oil, flour, you're going to make a margin of about 8 to 10%. If you're doing other businesses, maybe labor-based contracts, you're going to make about 20% in profit. Yeah. Now, we are borrowing from banks up to 24, 25%. That's almost Shylock standard of borrowing. It's so expensive, it will never, ever, ever make sense. If I borrow money right now and go and buy a pickup from Isuzu, hoping to do transport and pay back the loan, it is impossible. Okay. So the cost of borrowing has gone really up, because when President Uhuru was here, the cost of borrowing was 16%. We are now at 20 to 24, 25%. So it's getting worse every day. Young people cannot access capital because the first step towards obtaining that capital is you need a title deed or you need a logbook. Now, if I'm looking for a job and I don't have a business, where have I gotten a title deed or a logbook which I'm going to give as security to a bank. The President, William Ruto, is not intentional about making capital accessible to the people of Kenya for them to borrow and start business. I have more than 100 ideas in my head of things that I can do as a young person and create more than 1,000 jobs in a year. But I cannot do those things because I am not able to access the money because I need security, and because even if I was to get this loan, it will be expensive. So when you talk about the Hustler Fund, most people are not borrowing the Hustler Fund to start businesses. They're borrowing the Hustler Fund to eat. They're borrowing the Hustler Fund to afford food and basic necessities.
All right. I'll take a quick break. When we come back, I'll come to you, Angel, and also kasamwel, talk about this unemployment issue, and then there's the affordable housing, which it says there are 1,200 units that are complete and more than 4,800 available for sale, and Social Health Authority, where 16 million people are now being registered. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're coming back with this, still reflections on the Jamhuri Day at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We'll come back with your feedback as well in a short while.